Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Kwentong GK here on Gawad Kalinga USA's Facebook page. I'm your host, Donna Reyes, and I'm super excited this evening to have a very special guest, Father Nebres, Father Ben Nebres of the Ateneo de Manila University, and also a staunch advocate and supporter of Gawad Kalinga. Welcome to Kwentong GK, Father Ben.
Thank you, Donna.
So Father Ben, you came to Chicago. I'm so sorry I missed the event. It was
It was a very
fun.
wonderful, very short, but a wonderful visit. People were really great. You have to thank Josie and Leslie and everybody who put it together.
So can you tell us a little bit about the event, what it is about, and
It was, I think, triggered by the fact that GK Chicago is really focusing on Mindanao, and they wanted to know more about Mindanao and know about the work that Gawad Kalinga does in Mindanao. In particular, you know that GK Chicago wants to really support a major project in Arakan, North Cotabato. And in fact, Maricel and I are going there at the end of the month, together with Charlie Kapati. So we're visiting Arakan. But I told them I've been working a lot in different parts of Mindanao, Mindanao, dominantly Lanao del Sur, Marawi in particular, and also Mindanao. But I have not been good to Sulu, but I keep in touch with people in Sulu, and we have a major feeding program there in some of the toughest places in Sulu, like Patikul. So it was really to chat about that, and to talk about helping people understand how Mindanao is and the work that Gawad Kalinga is doing there. It's really fantastic. The GK Mindanao is very, very active and doing a lot of work there. And then I had so that was I had dinner with Josie and others at Josie's house, Josie Disterhoff. And there we were really able to talk about my understanding of Mindanao, the challenges we face there, and also the opportunities to really make a difference for the people in Mindanao, everybody, our Muslim brothers and sisters, the indigenous peoples, and the poor in general in Mindanao. And I've updated also on the various GK initiatives that I'm familiar with in Mindanao. And then we talk quite a bit about the project they have in Arakan, which GK Chicago is raising quite a bit of money and so on. And then I had lunch at Max's in Chicago, organized by Leslie at IKEA. Thank you, Leslie, for on. Thank you very much. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. It was nice to see a Max's in Chicago. Although I tell people here the chicken is super big.
It caters to the American appetite.
Yes. But it was nice to meet more people in over lunch in Max's. And it was good to see that Leslie was bringing in young people, next generation, because that's one of the big concerns we have. Big efforts right now, how to engage and inspire our next generation, because even the young people I worked with at the very beginning of Gawad Kalinga are getting a bit older, and we have to pass on the passion and the tradition. So it was a wonderful visit, and I really appreciated it very much.
I'm very proud of our Chicago team. I built Chicago team because I'm based here in Chicago. But Father, I actually have been to Mindanao many years ago. I was, I think, 19 years old. I was a college student at Miriam College. So kapitbahay, we're neighbors.
Yeah.
And I just turned 50 last month. So it's been many, many years ago. And I remember at that time, people were afraid of going to Mindanao. But it was just...
Actually, hanggang ngayon.
That's what I was going to ask you. So what do you... Yeah. So what do you say, Father, to those people?
Oh, I think if they would just give themselves a chance and go around Mindanao,
Yes. What do you
they
say,
see so much energy, so much drive, so much going on, so much change. No, it's quite safe. There are one or two places, maybe some parts of Basilan, or some parts of Sulu that we would say, don't go unless you have somebody going with you. But otherwise, Mindanao is not only safe, but a beautiful place.
Yes.
And over the past 10 years, fantastic roads have been built. So there are so many new roads. So traveling through Mindanao right now is quite pleasant. You can go places that you could not reach before, you can easily reach now.
Yeah.
So and
I
there was there's so much energy there.
Yes. I remember, I mean, like I said, that was many years ago, but I remember really at all, right? I was just really, it was like not, because I grew up in, I'm from Pampanga. So it was just
Yeah.
totally different. And I had the opportunity to climb Mount Apo. We reached the top of Mount Apo, and it was just a lot of,
Here.
it was an amazing experience, Now I can't even get to the, low, lower, because I'm like 30 pounds. That was 30 pounds ago. I always say, Father. So, so Father, how did you, when or how and when did you start your engagement with Gawad Kalinga?
Well, around January of 2002, a member of our board of trustees and for some reason I'm blanking out, or invited us for a meeting in his house. He was one of the leaders of Gawad Kalinga, and he invited all the presidents of the 5 Ateneos. We were invited there. And that time, Gawad Kalinga, as we know it, did not yet exist. It was really angkop, the outreach of Couples for Christ.
Yes, Father.
And they presented to us the work that they were doing in Bagong Silang. Isa Cuevas was the one who made the presentation. And I was really very impressed as they talked about their engagement with the extremely poor people in Bagong Silang, including the tough guys, the heads of gangs, and so on, told us about their work, told us about the play Bagong Silang, and how it was very, very moving. So that was my first encounter. And then about maybe a year later, Tony Melotto, Isa came to Ateneo and said, we're starting to go and build houses. That was maybe early 2003. And building communities for the poor. And they asked, would Ateneo be willing to join? I said, sure. Maybe just ideally give us a place not too far from Ateneo, so that our faculty and our students could go there. And so we started what is our first Ateneo Gawad Kalinga village, which is in Payatas, Blue Eagle Village, we call it. So that was the start of our engagement. And from then on, it's been tuloy-tuloy. I've been very engaged with Gawad Kalinga since 2002, 2003. And then, of course, we were together in so many disasters that happened, so many typhoons, or Marion explosion, all kinds of challenges that have faced us. And we've been together in that work. So that's how we started.
Yeah. You were one of the early supporters of Gawad Kalinga, Father. But
I think so, yes.
Yeah, but I'm sure you've come across other nonprofit or NGOs as well. But what is it about Gawad Kalinga that I guess is different, or that really caught your attention?
Well,
part of it.
Well, the typical NGO, like Philippine Business for Social Progress, a lot of foundations who want to help the poor, they don't really have communities underground.
Mm.
So the best they can normally do is to give relief goods during disasters, or maybe support a scholar or so. But the difference with Gawad Kalinga is that we have really realized more and more with Gawad Kalinga that the gift that Gawad Kalinga gives is to really build families and communities. I always tell people that because they see the houses that GK builds, and they also see Habitat, and they think we are like Habitat. And I said, no, Habitat is an American organization. They build the houses, and they assume just like in the US, bahala na sila from that point on. But I say, Gawad Kalinga, our goal, I said, is not really simply to build houses. It's really to build families and communities. Kasi yun naman ang pinanggalingan ng Gawad Kalinga. No? It really started with Couples for Christ, and it started with the mission of forming Christian families among the poor. No? Now, of course, we don't always have all Christian families, but the commitment to form families and communities among the poorest of the poor has been there. And so that's been the dominant mission. And because of that, we really are there with the communities. Like for Gawad Kalinga Ateneo, I set up an office. We're still there in Ateneo. For Gawad Kalinga Ateneo, which works a lot with GK National. Mark Lawrence Cruz was one of the first heads of that office. And we take care of our communities, like the community we built in Payatas, which we built in 2003. We're still there. I just visited there recently to see the people and just to see how they're moving. So the big difference is that Gawad Kalinga over the years has really a very close engagement with people and communities underground. No other NGO has that. They might visit paminsan-minsan, they might give help, but they are not there on a very regular basis with the community. And so that very close engagement is really what, for me, differentiates what GK does. So sometimes here in Ateneo, we talk about men and women, not just for others, but with others. But very few groups are really with others. They're just for others. Hindi naman masama yun.
Yeah.
But like during the pandemic, the best that they could do, other NGOs, is to go and give relief goods, or maybe have a community pantry.
Right. Which
But
is okay too.
but Gawad Kalinga could actually do daily feeding of the children, because we had communities on the ground to do the cooking and do the feeding. No, no other organization has communities on the ground very well connected with us and to do that. So, for example, right now, in the work that we are doing to repair houses destroyed by Typhoon Odette, like in Dinagat Islands, we're able to do that because we have GK communities who went over there and are working there with the people there. I don't think any. So organizations, for example, part of that work is being funded by people I know, the Gokongwei Brothers Foundation, but we're very glad that they're giving the money for it, for the galvanized iron and the other things related for the house, but they don't have the workers. GK is able to mobilize Gawad Kalinga communities all over Mindanao to go there and help the communities. So that's the biggest difference. I tell people that, sometimes when you reflect on this in the light of the Gospels, when God chose to come among us in Jesus Christ, he did not just come to give us a message or to give us some help. He lived among us. He was really there among us in Nazareth. And I think that's what GK has. We really are with the communities, and we are really there with them on a very regular basis. And we have grown together. I guess that's the biggest difference.
And I can't agree with you more, Father. I mean, it really is, for me as well, the biggest attraction for me personally about GK is its presence. Talagang may presence on the ground. And
presence,
he said, it's yung commitment talaga. It's very, it's solid and long lasting, di ba? And the second thing is its ability to mobilize, right? And I think because because GK has presence, strong presence ground amongst the people, like you mentioned, it's really, I think that's the biggest that's the biggest factor why they are really able to mobilize, because they build relationships, with the people.
And so, Donna, what happens is that we're really able not just to provide material help for them, but we're really able to help the communities grow. We really have, like, for example, maybe almost 8 or 9 years ago, we did a kind of an evaluation of where the communities are, tinanong namin sa mga all the communities, anong nagbago sa buhay niyo? What has changed in your life? And you could see that they did not talk about the houses. Hindi na pinag-usapan yung mga bahay. They did not talk about the external things.
Yeah.
But they talked about, sabi nila, mas maganda na ang pakikutubo namin sa pamilya. We're now much better as a family. Nagdadasal na kami. We're praying. And nagtutulungan kami. We're helping one another. And in one Agawad Kalinga community in Gabaldon, which was Ateneo established in 2005. Sabi nila, tinanong ko sa kanila, what do you mean when you say na nagtutulungan na kayo? Sabi nila, paminsan-minsan, parang halian, napapansin namin na walang usok. We notice over lunch that there's no smoke in the house. Ibig sabihin, hindi sila nagluluto, they're not cooking, hindi sila kakain. Nagpapadala kami ng pagkain. We send food to them. So that's really fantastic for me. In other words, and then they talk about their sense of self-worth has grown, because one of the things that we learned from Tony Melotto and others is that the deepest poverty is a loss of self-worth, a loss of human dignity. And what they say also is, iba na ang pagtingin ng mga tao sa amin. People now look at us differently. In other words, their own self-image has changed. So I think it's because of their working together and being together of GK with these communities, it's not simply material things like houses or food that we give to them, because they feel that we are there for them and appreciate them. We also help them to become themselves, to grow. And that is, I think, the greatest gift that we're able to give, that it's not just self-confidence, it's a deeper sense of self-worth, a deeper sense of who they are, who their neighbor are. And that's really the biggest growth that that we're able to give to them. It's not just the material things, pero yung pagkatao nila, their sense of being really children of God. So for me, that's the gift that comes from working together over the years. No?
Yeah. And I've interviewed some people who have benefited from the work of Gawad Kalinga, right? Sila Tonyo Aduru, sila yung people, mga graduate ng SEEDS in the JP Jose and all of those people. And kita mo talaga, Father, how they're, like you said, it's not just self-confidence, but really yung self-esteem, yung self-worth na, right?
Yes.
Their own lovability, their view of their own lovability has really,
yes.
I did not know them from before, but just the way they speak, right? And it's not, it's more than self-confidence talaga. So before we're going to shift gears a little bit here, Father, but I wanted to just read a couple of messages saying hi to you. Leslie Tikia says, hi, Father.
Leslie.
Leslie, I'm not sure if you caught the earlier part of this interview with Father. He mentioned about the event, the Art of Giving event in Chicago that happened last month. I'm so sorry I missed it. I was in Dallas. Now I remember. I was like, where was I? Because if I was here, I would have totally attended. But I was in Dallas, unfortunately, for a pre-scheduled event already. And then this is coming from Robbie Reyes' father, who's my husband, who's an Ateneo alum from Prep Daw. He's very proud. He says, great to see you, Father Nebres. You must have
been. Rob.
Yeah, he turned 54 this year. So I'm not sure if you were the president of Ateneo at that time when he was studying. But he says, hi, very proud.
Hi.
Yeah, there. All right, Father, so you've been the longest serving president of Ateneo de Manila University. Was in your work focused on teaching and development of mathematics in the Philippines and Southeast Asia. And you were named as the National Scientist of the Philippines in 2011. Were you always interested in becoming a priest and also an educator, or was it, did it go hand in hand from early on in your life?
I was interested in becoming a priest from a very young age. Because of, I guess, the influence of my growing up, or living in the church, and the influence of a teacher that I had in grade school in a uh, grade grade 1 to 4. I was in a public school in my hometown, Bacnautan, La Union. But grade 5 and grade 6, I was in a school run by the Belgian sisters, the same as STC. And I was once influenced by a grade school teacher there. And so I actually entered the seminary for the priesthood when I was 12.
Oh, wow.
So I've really been in a seminary since the age of 12. I was in vegan seminary, and then after high school, 16, I joined the Jesuits, and so so that was it. So becoming a priest was there very, very early. But then through reading and other things, I ended up joining the Jesuits after high school, and it and there actually we were told that ideally, because we run schools, universities, that we should specialize in something. Originally, I was asked to specialize in classics, Latin and Greek, and I spent a lot of time studying Latin and Greek. But I told my superiors that that really did not excite me. I could do well, but it did not really excite me. And I remember that in high school, I did enjoy mathematics. So I asked permission to study mathematics. And I enjoyed doing it. So so that's what I did. And people are surprised because when I tell them that I really did have very few mathematics courses in college. I studied most of it on my own. But then I did well enough, so I could apply to graduate school in different universities, and I ended up doing a PhD in Stanford. And that was really wonderful. I do enjoy doing mathematics. I still teach math now, and I still enjoy doing it. So yeah, the priesthood was more important. But intellectually, I was very, very interested in science and math, and something that I really enjoy doing. I enjoy doing problems. And my philosophy teachers were probably not too happy because I would sit in the back of the class and do math problems while they were lecturing. But since I did well in the class, they did not bother me too much. So yeah, it's something I really enjoy doing.
So I suppose also you enjoy teaching, being an educator for
Oh
me.
yes, I still teach now. I'm so glad that we finally have face-to-face classes. So it's really so much nicer to see my students again and interact with them. So I've started teaching again. Well, I taught during the pandemic, but it was all online. But it's nice to see them again.
Yeah, so because the classes are back to face. Also, Father, you were involved in social political concerns of the Philippines during the years of martial law and in the early years of restoring democracy in the country. So how were those years? I'm a martial law baby. I was born 1972, but growing up, I didn't really. I was still. I guess I was maybe too young. So, I was born the year martial law was declared, but how were those years being involved in those? And what?
Well, first of all, I guess I was one of the few Jesuits, few people who really had a very deep interest in understanding the social history of the Philippines or social problems. So I read a lot about not just about the Philippine Revolution of 1896, but about the peasant revolts in the late 1800s and in the 1900s. I read up about the beginning of the Communist Party of the Philippines in the early 1900s, the socialist parties. I actually kept up with the old Communist Party of the Philippines in Luis Taruk. And then later on, I read a lot of Marx and Lenin and Mao Zedong. I was very interested in the question of how do you change a society, which unfortunately we still are today, where you have a few very wealthy and very rich and the majority poor. So I was interested in that in every country. So I was interested in the Russian Revolution. I was interested in the Chinese Revolution, and so on. And so when I read up on those things. And so in 1970, when I came back from graduate school, and there was activism in the Philippines. I don't know, you read about the first quarter storm, all that. That was something I understood. I understood where it was coming from. And I told people that this is not new. This has been in the Philippines. Nakalimutan lang natin.
Yeah.
And so when I became dean of the college quite early in 1972, 73. And we had activism in the Ateneo all over the country.
Mhm.
And so the challenge that we faced then was, well, on the one hand, there was the martial law government, who was very concerned about student activism. And there was also the Communist Party, the National Democratic Front, recruiting our students. And although I agreed with the Communist Party and the Social Revolution, I did not agree with them on other things,
Right.
the
On the
violence,
approach, right? Yeah.
the dictatorship of the proletariat, and so on.
Yeah.
So I work with groups. People call them today the social democratic groups.
Yes.
So a lot of my goal was to really form an alternative that would work for social reform, but still push for democratic reform also. And so when I was dean of the Ateneo College, I set up the Office of Social Concern. I set up a lot of programs in the Ateneo de Manila to have our students engage mainly with farmers. So I tell my students today that, you know, your immersion is just about 2 or 3 days. In those days, they would stay for a whole week with the farmers. And we only sent one student per barrio to be sure that they talk to the farmers and not to one
Yeah.
another.
Yeah.
Of course, we sent them to safe places. So my engagement really at that time was to help Ateneo and young people to really engage the roots of the social problem, which is poverty. Of course, in the process, you encounter both the martial law government, who suspect you of being rebels because why are you there with the poor? Taga Ateneo kayo, why are you there? And we also face the challenge of the communist left recruiting them.
Yeah.
So that was what it was like at that time, and at least for me. Many, some I do know that some also of my friends were in jail, or some. It was a time where you were asking what it was like. Well, it was a time when you could be arrested anytime. They had this ASO, we call them, arrest, cease and seizure order, and so sometimes when young people today talk about being targeted and so on, so, oh come on, you know, you were not just targeted in the 1970s. You could actually be picked up and disappear now. So that was the engagement, and so I had to be sure to be very careful about protocols with the students, especially those who were being invited to go underground, because some went underground. And you had to keep protocols with them. So it was a time of a lot of tension. But the good part of that time is that young people in Ateneo and Miriam, Marino, a lot of the young people I work with, because were also from Marino at that time, they were really deeply engaged with the poor, with farmers in particular. So that was the very good part. There were tensions, of course, between tensions with the government, right? Tensions with those on the left, and you had to manage it, and some people really suffered for it. But I would say that the good thing with it at that period is that there was real engagement with workers and farmers, far stronger than we have today. You know? So it was also a good time.
Yeah. No, actually, my mother was studying for her master's at Ateneo. I think in the 71, just before she and my
Yeah,
father.
that was the time of the first quarter storm.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I've heard stories about it from her personal accounts, and she's one of those students who were very much. She was only, I think, 22 at that time, taking her master's. And yeah, and she told me about stories about her, studying and sitting into the those they call them teach-ins or something, right? But obviously she never went undergrad or anything like that, because once she then in in some things, right? But like you said, some
Yeah.
approach she did not fully support. But yeah, so well, thank you, Father, for sharing that, because I think it's important also to revisit or to to be reminded of history of what was happening during those times, right? And be more, I think, be more appreciative. Well, not appreciative, but be more, I guess, uh, di naman, I guess between vigilant and appreciative, to be more aware of what's going on, in our society, in our government, and what role we play in what's going on, right? So, Father, again, shifting gears here for a little bit, you were also involved in the business world in the late 1990s, building relationships between universities and business and technology. How are you able to do all of these things, being, leading an educational institution like Ateneo de Manila University, and also at the same time being involved in the in business, and what exactly is your role during that time? What was your involvement?
Well, there are several things, one of the challenges that I faced leading Ateneo was to help Ateneo de Manila and maybe other universities to understand that the world was changing. So, for example, in the 1970s, when I was dean of Ateneo College, it was to try to help Ateneo understand that the social activism, martial law, was changing the world we were living in, and so there was a need for Ateneo to move beyond simply basketball, which was a big thing in the 60s or even now, and to talk about working with workers and farmers and so on, and engage the political world, which we had not really engaged with before. So that was the 1970s. But then when I returned in the 1990s, I had to explain to Ateneo and others that that world dominated by politics and ideology was changing, and that the dominant forces in the world was becoming business and technology. Computers were just coming in, the internet was just coming in, and all the things that we take for granted today in terms of the dominant role of companies like Apple, like Microsoft, that was just emerging at that time. And so a lot of my task was helping Ateneo and others to engage that world, a much more competitive world, the competencies that we needed to do that, and to understand these forces. And so, and then what happened is that a member of the board of trustees of Ateneo, Mr. Manny Pangilinan, the PLDT, was there, and he invited me to join first his company, Metro Pacific, and then invited me to join the board of PLDT. And I was interested in particular with the PLDT because I understood, I saw that internet and telecoms were changing the world. That a lot of the changes in the world was communications, and understanding how the communications world was changing was important for me. So it was not just business in tech in general. I was interested in particular in what you'd call the disruptive technologies, understanding them and try to be a bit ahead of the curve in terms of programs that we would offer in Ateneo de Manila, and in terms of the mindset that I have to give to faculty and to students. Because it was not that simple. We take internet for granted today, but when I first became involved in looking at the internet in the early 1990s, it's only being used by universities and the U.S. Department of National of Defense. Actually, that was what it was. It was actually designed for the Department of Defense, and internet was being used by universities for research and communication. And I was working at that time with the Department of Science and Technology and a major program. And we were interested in internet simply so that our graduate students could connect with their advisors in the United States. So we only saw it at that point. So we did not really see the power of the internet yet. Companies at that time did not think that it was worthwhile for business. They would be very surprised. In 1990, companies didn't really think that the internet was useful for them. But I was interested in it because I saw that it was going to be very important and change the way we do things, at least in the university world. So that was my interest in the business. Was not business in general. although of course I learned about that. It was really to understand the changes happening in our environment because of the rise of business and technology as dominant forces in the world. As you know, today, the richest companies are really communications technology, Facebook, Meta, the Meta universe, metaverse, and so on. So that's really the background. It's really trying to help us in the Philippines understand the new environment and the new world that we're entering.
So, Father, you continue to be involved in many in serving the underprivileged, right? Obviously, you work with Gawad Kalinga, which we're more familiar with, our friends here in GK USA. But you're also involved in the Ateneo Center for Educational Development, and
Yes.
you're working with over 400 public schools. Can you tell us a
Yes.
little more about that?
Yes. So I always tell people that there have always been two very powerful passions in my life, which have driven me up to now. One was intellectual, so that's why I ended up doing mathematics. But the other one is really, I would say, love of country. I really do love our country, and I'm very concerned for the future of our country. And so I've recognized from, as I mentioned earlier, that we have not done much for our poor in our country. Farmers, fishermen, workers, we have not done much for that. And that was why I was interested in understanding the social revolution in the world. That's why I was so interested in understanding the Russian Revolution. I was interested in understanding the Chinese Revolution. I wanted to understand, how do you change a society, revolution or other ways? Uh, uh, and, uh, and so that was my interest in reading Marx, Lenin, and Mao Zedong. That was just my interest also in the 1970s in getting our students among the poor. It was an effort to make a difference, eventually for our poor. And so when I became president of Ateneo de Manila in 1993, I did engage the business world because it was important to understand. But what I told Ateneo de Manila at that time is that I summarized our goals in two. I said to close two gaps. First is the competitiveness gap, because we're really quite a lot in Southeast Asia. We're behind Singapore, even behind Indonesia. And it's to close that competitiveness gap in education, in business, and so on, and economics. So that's one, and that's what we pushed. But the other one I said is to close the poverty gap in the country. And I said, in particular, to close the gap between a school like Ateneo de Manila and the public schools. Because I said 90% of Filipino students, 90% of elementary students in the Philippines go to the public schools. 80% of high school students go to the public schools. I don't know if people believe me, but I tell them, look, the future of our country will not depend on Ateneo, UP, or LaSalle. It's going to depend on the public schools, because 90% of our young people go there. So we have to do something about them. And so one way I define the challenge of helping the poor is education. Because I've often quoted a British economist, Amartya Sen, who says that the deepest poverty is not lack of money or lack of opportunities. It is, he says, there is, he says, a poverty of capability, kulang sa kakayahan. So I tell people to explain that. I say, if you have a poor person, gusto mong tulungan, you want to help that person, pero walang pinag-aralan, uneducated, or may tuberculosis, you cannot help much. And so I've said that we have to tackle the problem of lack of education and poor health, because without that, you cannot really help them. And so I set up the Ateneo Center for Educational Development as our arm in the Ateneo de Manila. I'm glad you're still there, even I finished my term, is to work with the public schools. And so we have been working with the public schools since 1997, 96. And actually, it's because of the work of the Ateneo Center for Educational Development. We call it ACE. We pronounce it ACE. It's there that we learned about the problem of hunger and malnutrition. Kasi we would meet regularly with the teachers, tanong namin sa kanila, bakit hindi pumapasok yung mga bata, why don't they come to school, why are they not learning? And more, sabi ng mga teachers, gutom po sila, gutom po sila. Either hindi sila pumapasok, because like in Payatas, where we were working with the schools, they said the children have a choice. Pwede silang mamasura, they can become scavengers and get something to eat. O papasok sila, hindi sila kakain. They can go to school, not to eat. In the rural areas, in Cabiao, where I go regularly, they'll say, pwede siyang pumunta sa bukid, magkapas doon, help in the farm, at kakain siya, o papasok siya, hindi kakain. So that is the reality of our country. And it was really that work that led us to feeding programs, which started in 2009. And Kusina ng Kalinga learned from Ateneo, because Kusina ng Kalinga started only after Typhoon Yolanda, around 2015. And Ateneo de Manila had already been doing that for about 5 years. No? The feeding programs, we started in Commonwealth Avenue, with a kitchen for 4,000 children there. Then the Senator Gatchalian, who was then mayor of Valenzuela, said, I've always wanted to do something like this for the children, but I did not know why. And so until the pandemic, Valenzuela was our biggest kitchen. Ateneo was running a kitchen for them there, doing 16,000 to 18,000 children every school day, massive operation. So that's really the history of, so ACE, Ateneo Center for Agricultural Development, has continued to work with schools. But now, for example, during the pandemic, ACE continues to, we're right now providing food packs, vegetable packs once a week for 5,000 families of poor children. That's my biggest advocacy right now, raising funds for them, because hunger has continued. So when you work with the public schools, one of the lessons we learned there, when you tackle education for the poor, you cannot separate poverty, hunger and health, and education. You cannot simply say, we will just do teacher training or give books. Bahala na yung papakain. Because the other things we found out is that hindi lang sila gutom. We found children who were considered bobo. They could not read, but they really could not see the blackboard. They did not know, they were too young to know that they needed eyeglasses. No? You had bad teeth, you had worms. So talagang, when you get down to that level, you cannot separate these questions. You have simply to engage the whole area of poverty, hunger, and health. And now we're trying to tackle a deeper problem that children in school, which is what is called the first 1,000 days. In other words, we realize that the biggest problem we face is that there's malnutrition of the mothers and the babies. And so our biggest challenge now, we're working now with Mark Lawrence and Kusina ng Kalinga to address that period from pregnancy until the baby is 2 years old. The most critical period of growth for a child. And that's really the reason why we talk about 30% of our children, 0 to 5, are stunted or malnourished. So I think one of the challenges for us as a country is how to really care for that problem. It's been there. Statistic has been there, but it's such a deep problem. And so so the work I've done with the public schools, we continue to do teacher training. We try to do all of these things, but we realize that we have to engage the world they're in, the malnutrition and the poverty also.
I actually have a personal account, Father, of a child that he must have been 7 years old at that time, many years ago. I asked why he wouldn't go to school, and he said, "Nahihilo po ako, nagugutom kasi ako." So he said, "Nahihilo." He was nauseous.
Nahihilo, yes.
Yeah. So he said, "I couldn't go to school because I'm nauseous, and I can't go to school." And he said, I was like, "Why are you nauseous?" And he said, "I had nothing to eat." And so it's true. This child actually told me that. And, lo and behold, by God's grace and people who have helped him, He's now in college, and he got a scholarship at the at university in Pampanga. And so thanks
Actually,
to him.
one of the stories we often told in the beginning of our feeding program was about a boy in grade school in Parañaque, grade 5. He di lang nahilo, hinimatay talaga. He really passed out. No?
Yeah.
And then natauhan siya when he woke up. He said, Huwebes pala. And the teacher says, ano yung sabihin Huwebes? The family is so poor, they take turns not eating. Huwebes, hindi siya kumakain. He does not eat. So that's the reality. That's the reality of life. Yeah.
That's just really heartbreaking, and and we need more.
By the way, when I had this Zoom during my visit to Chicago, we talked about these problems, and I pointed out I think a 2015 eyewitness report of Cara David called Mga Anak ng Pugadlawin, which some watched, and because Mark Lawrence had mentioned it, that is there in that town, in that barangay Pugadlawin in Mercedes, Camarines Norte, there is a cemetery there of all of children below 5. No, it's a heart. Maricel watched it and said, "Talagang it was heart-wrenching."
Oh my goodness! Wow. And we need more help. Obviously, we need more organizations like ACE to help out, because the problem is just really overwhelming.
Well, ACE and Kusina ng Kalinga are the
And
most
Kusina ng Kalinga,
have been doing this programs.
Yes, Father. And I want to talk about synergia or
Synergia Foundation. Yes.
Yeah. But before we talk about that, Father, I wanted to read some of the comments here from Leslie again, Leslie Tikia. With Father, there's always something new to learn. And of course, she majored in mathematics also. That's why he probably posted this when we were talking about mathematics. That's why I enjoyed talking to him when he was here in Chicago. Thanks for all the support and teachings, Father. And then from Rose Cabrera, thank you for all you do, Father Ben. You are God's gift to the Filipino people. What a blessing to know you and work alongside you in God's vineyard. Your amazing youthful energy and stamina challenge us all. True.
It's the same with Rose and Leslie. They also have
I
amazing
know,
energy.
right? Your energy talagang grabe. Maricel Villanueva, thank you, Father Ben, for all that you have been and still are to both the young and the old, especially in GA. Sometimes it's hard to understand poverty and easy to be discouraged, but you provide light, reminding us always of Matthew 25. See you Sunday. And then
Thank you to Maricel.
Dr. Charlie Capati, Dr. Carlos Capati said, good evening, Father Ben. And Luz Sapin Micabalo says she's watching. And from Roy Anticamaramang, kalma ayong buntag, Father Ben. God bless. So let's talk about, what's going on? Somebody's not mute. What's going on? All right. I have hold on. What's still there?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I don't know why I have an echo. Let me just fix that. Hello? Okay. All right. I don't know what happened there.
Okay.
Oh, it's there again. What is going on? Okay. Can you hear me? Did it go?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I took off my feedback anymore. I took off my... Do you hear the feedback, Father?
No, I don't hear any feedback.
Okay. So it's just me. Lovely. Do you hear the feedback? I hope we're okay.
Hello, Miss D.
Yeah.
Hi, hi. Sorry po.
All right. Okay. We're good. Okay. Sorry about that, Father
No
Ned,
problem.
watching some technical difficulties there. But I wanted to talk about Sinergia. And you're working with more than 300 municipalities, including the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of.
Yes, yes.
So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Oh, Synergia Foundation started. Uh, Actually, it started way back in the late 1990s. It's a Ford Foundation program because I chatted then with the Ford Foundation people, and they wanted to know how they could help in public elementary education. And I mentioned that we really should grow in scale and try to work with whole municipalities instead of just school by school. And I mentioned to them at that time that there is what they call a local school board, co-chaired by the mayor and by the principal or the vice superintendent, and and that would be good to engage with them. And they did that, and then and they engaged somebody, Dr. Nene Guevara, who I had actually known way back in the 70s when she was a graduate student at Philippine National University. And she asked me to direct her thesis in math education. So Ford Foundation, because of they lost quite a bit of money in the 19 in the crisis in 1997. They left the Philippines, but they left an endowment for what became Synergia Foundation. And so Nana Guevara, Dr. Nana Guevara, who became president of Synergia Foundation, she still is, looking for somebody to succeed her, and asked me to be the chairman for the group. And it's been fantastic. The group has really worked tremendously. And the focus of there's a starting point of Synergia Foundation is to establish, to get the whole community engaged in their elementary schools, beginning with the mayor and the principals in what is called the local school board. They try to say that the education of the children in the public schools cannot just be left to the deaf end. They need the support of the local government and of the community, and that has of course we say the RIA Foundation also does a lot of teacher training, in particular a lot of training of principals and the leaders, and in particular focuses on the role of governance, the role of the LGU, the role of the DepEd, and so on. That has really been fantastic. For example, during the pandemic, I was in Zoom meetings with groups of mayors and DepEd officials, teachers, and parents, trying to talk about how they were managing education during the pandemic. And I was very impressed that this involvement of the whole community really made a big difference. In my own hometown, Macnaughton, La Union, I saw how they were working, that the former PTA, the Parents Teacher Association, became really what they called they became school governance councils per school, and the parents took the initiative in getting the modules, bringing them there so that the teachers could be free. They offered to for single parents, so the single parents could work. They offered to be the ones to take care of their children, bring their modules for them. You could really see the difference in when the whole community comes together. And in some places, they have the barangay tanods to go around. If they see a child of school age, not in school, they bring them to the school. So, of course, so that simply establishes the groundwork, the framework for a lot of other reforms. And because of then of course Synergia Foundation works a lot on basic things like reading problems and math. uh, actually in about 400 municipalities, in about half the municipalities in the Muslim areas. And that's one of the reasons I'm particularly engaged with them, because the level of education there is particularly weak. And so we really want to help. So I've been with Synergia people in in Lanao del Sur, Marawi, and in Maguindanao quite a bit. We would meet with the mayors of Synergia Foundation quite regularly, in particular the mayors in Barm. We usually met in Zamboanga or in Davao. And so, yeah, and former mayor of Naga City and the ILG secretary, Jesse Robredo, was one of the big advocates of Synergia Foundation.
Father, you're really involved in so many, I mean, you've done a lot and continue to do a lot for Gawad Kalinga, but also involved in so many, in these other really noteworthy organizations also, trying to bridge the gap, between the poor and, and the privileged, right? And
Yes.
it's really inspiring. When I think about, I've been a Gawad Kalinga volunteer and advocate since 2003. And I'll be honest with you and every one of our friends here watching, there are times when I'm really, truly overwhelmed. And, and I begin to think, oh my gosh, there's so much work to do. And there's only a few of us, right? But what you shared this evening really inspired me personally. I'm sure, many of our, if not all of our viewers this evening to just keep on, because there's hope when we hear the stories that you've shared, and you've been doing this for many years and you've never really given up.
I'll tell you something, Donna, because Mark Lawrence Cruz, who I work with a lot, also said that sometimes. And I said, Mark, you have to remember that even Jesus did not cure all the lepers. He did not feed all the hungry. He did 5,000 once, but I don't think he did that many times. The lasting thing, I think what we really need to do is what my Buddhist friends said. When I go around with Chuchi Foundation, the Buddhist foundation, they're not all Buddhists. When we meet with the poor, what they say to the people is that we're not here to give you relief. We're not here to give you proof. Of course, we will, kasi kailangan ninyo. Pero hindi yun ang mission namin. Our mission, they said, is to spread compassion and care. That's our mission. And I think that's the most important thing that you, myself, and Gawad Kalinga can do, is really to spread caring and compassion. And just like with Jesus, it has to be patiently done one person at a time or several persons at a time. And so you should not give up, because every person you reach makes a difference. Yeah.
And thank you for that, Father. And this has been really inspiring. I just want to end with reading the last few comments here, and we will wrap up for this evening from Maricel. From Tito Charlie Kapati, Dr. Carlos Kapati. The hunger issue goes on even for many students who are lucky enough to attend college. One of our scholarship drives is to provide meals and wheels. And Tita Carol Tulid says, magandang gabi po, Father Ben, and also from Marisol Barbarin, good evening. So thank you again, Father Ben, for
Thank you.
Evening. This has been a really, it's an hour gift for me that will last me,
Thanks, Donna.
long time. And I know I echo other people's sentiments too. And sabi nga nila sa atin, para diba, tao lang. we're only humans. And I think when we were about to give up, when we're tired, I think it's okay to be tired, but also have to remember that we also do have limitations, and that's okay, and that's where we draw strength from each other, from our Lord Jesus Christ. So good evening again, everyone, and thank you, Father Ben, for joining us.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you, everybody, for being here. Let's go on with the work. God bless you all.
Thank you, Father.
Bye-bye.